reanimate like ring wraiths. Like,
Yep. Yeah.
I'll be like, bring me dream.
Oh man, that's such a weird situation, with Dream and all that
And
stuff.
not one that I'm prepared to comment on live internet.
We're going to be moving on. All right. Welcome back to the Media Pending Podcast, yet again recording at a different location. We had a bit going on for a while, and then we just had to record a couple episodes remote. The bit was that it was going to be in a different place every episode.
I say we keep that going. Like, it's a good bit.
It is a good bit.
Next time we can just drive to the top of a mountain.
The problem is this guy needs to be plugged in. It can record on its own, but it has to be plugged in. We'd have to get like a Zoom XLR for that.
We could just have all four of us in a van at the top of a mountain running a generator inside the van.
I mean, my car does have an outlet. We did record from the back of my car once.
Yeah,
But
I'd
the
prefer
back-
the
in
carbon
front of the-
monoxide inside the van.
in front of the
okay.
public restroom facility.
No.
Yeah, that one was funny. Anyway, today we've got the Hesse. He's been in a previous episode. He was here to talk about Minecraft last time, but we have a different subject. This is a
What do you know about
pending week.
Terraria?
Yeah, nothing.
All right, thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, so we three went to Europe earlier this year, and even before that, Jesse was getting into the concept of public transit and walkable cities, something he's very passionate about and well-researched, right?
I mean, at this point, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna
A few 100 hours of YouTube at least.
That's what we're going to be discussing today. So if walkable cities or public transit and anti-car rhetoric does not suit you, you might want to leave because you're probably not going to get that much of a
Content
differing...
warning for anti-car set.
or just listen anyway for watch time.
Yeah, but like...
You can go 30 minutes without your phone. Just leave it playing and go do something else.
I think of the people here, I am probably the most skeptic to being like fully in on public transit. Like I love it as a concept. I've loved walkable cities. The trains and buses I've taken in other countries have been phenomenal, but I feel a bit of a hypocrite because I do enjoy driving. I enjoy the freedom of the open road, and I like the environment in which I grew up. I like the feel of suburbia, even if I recognize that you have to have a car to live here, and that doesn't seem equitable or fair, in my opinion. So academically, I like wholeheartedly agree with public transit, but there's a part like the kernel at my core is like, but it's kind of nice though, right? Like that's the same way I feel about green lawns. Like in Utah, we definitely should not have green lawns, but I also have very fond memories of like laying in the grass in the backyard on summer nights. So
Yeah, well, that's why Jesse's here, Jason, is that he'll be happy to explain why you're wrong about everything.
You know,
the thing is, I agree with him, but I recognize my own
You
hypocrisy.
can agree and still be wrong.
yes, I don't think that. Just to clarify one thing, I think that you can, for example, you can be a car enthusiast and actually prefer that public transit be the status quo. I mean, it gets fewer people on your roads, gives you more options to get from point A to point B. And
You can
if
speed
a car
more.
lifestyle is your thing, then a public transit lifestyle for everyone else is also your thing. And for you, so that you have an alternative options if you don't just want to drive the same commute all the time. I think another thing to keep in mind is just the suburban model as a feasible or infeasible model, because you can build a lot of things, but if they're not feasible long term, then that has a serious weight.
And I think that there's also, I think what we need to do is we need to break it down into categories because there's different levels of suburbia.
Sure.
There's like Utah suburban, which is like everything's along I-15, you've got houses, but you're never in a spot where you live more than 10 minutes away from some sort of community center downtown. And then there's like probably, the worst example would be like suburban hell, like Austin, Texas, where you've got like 30 miles of just cookie cutter houses.
Difference is mostly just population.
Even in terms of like sustainable growth, we were talking about it a little bit before the podcast when we went to get brunch, breakfast, whatever that meal was.
I think that was in the breakfast domain.
I think it was breakfast. I mean, I'd got an omelet. So.
Got an omelet. Aaron got a waffle. I got hash browns.
I got sconed.
Anyway,
that's breakfast. And it was 9 o'clock. So
we were talking about the neighborhood that you grew up in, Aidan, and
Yes.
how if you want to just refresh that for the audience about
so
like the demographics of the people living there and the kind of timeline.
Yeah, so the neighborhood that I grew up in was kind of like it was a very rare. I guess I don't know how rare it was, but it was definitely like the golden ticket of like housing in Utah when my parents moved in there, because it is a very nice neighborhood. It is a wealthy neighborhood. The section of it that we live in is not like, it is still very nice, but it is not as intense as it goes. Like within the city that I lived, there are areas of it that just scale exponentially, and you've got like multi-million-dollar houses just a couple blocks away. And so
You could have a multi-million-dollar house in this neighborhood now.
yeah, but back in the day when my parents moved in, and they had 3 young kids, they were able to buy and afford a house there. It was, I think, about 2006, 2007. So, the housing market was good at the time in Utah, and they were able to move in. And so were a lot of, families with young children. And the neighborhood I grew up in was just bursting with, kids. I mean, my school, there were so many, kids who lived on my street alone, neighborhood. Like, it was kind of ridiculous how many it was. And I was using Halloween as an example because we were talking about that a little bit earlier. But Halloween night, it would just be swarms of people. It'd be crowds and crowds of children flocking in the streets. But the way the housing market has gone, those houses that my parents and everyone else over there bought are no longer an attainable solution for parents with young children. And so there are no children, hardly any children that live in those neighborhoods now, because you've got to be filthy rich in order to buy one of those houses. Like, I think my parents' house is like quadrupled in value since they bought it. So
I believe it.
And yeah, and it makes it tempting to move because it's like you can sell that off for a pretty penny. But yeah, like Halloweens are just dead now. You go there, there's no kids, it's just an empty nester neighborhood.
Like the concept of living in a house that, you bought for a certain price, but if you were to buy that same house today, you couldn't afford, not because your income changed, but because the market has changed so significantly, is kind of a mind-boggling concept. Right.
Yeah. One of my favorite memes on the internet right now, because it's so truthful and it's so like disheartening, but like the joke of like, yeah, like I really messed up. Like I should have spent less time like playing in the sandbox when I was 6, and I should have been investing in like property.
Really, though.
It's like my biggest mistake growing up was being in first grade instead of like
looking back,
putting a
at
down
9-year-old
payment
me.
on it. Yeah. And it's like you see those memes and it's like it's so true though. It's like the
that's
worst
what it sounds like, yeah.
worst thing that we could have done was being the wrong age at the right time. And it's like, all you can do is just sit and hope and pray that things get better. But
so public transit plays into that discussion as well, because public transit synergizes especially well with denser housing. And as you increase the housing supply, obviously that'll sate demand better. It'll drive the price down. I think there's a big discussion that we could have. I said jokingly at the beginning about Georgia's land taxes. I've been looking into that recently, and I see some issues, but I think it's probably something to discuss another time.
Okay.
But it is kind of mind-boggling that a house, and especially just the land that the house is on has appreciated so much, because the house is depreciating, but even as it is, the lot is quadrupling in value.
Yeah.
And that's the really mind-boggling part.
Yeah. I mean, my in-laws live not 10 minutes from here, and they've got an insane backyard. Like, it just goes on and on. Like, I don't know if you guys have been over there.
I've looked back there. I haven't actually gone there into the backyard.
It goes on, and it's like the price they bought it for, like, I think it was well under $1 million when they got it, like, and now it's probably
multi-million, you think?
Oh, I think it's above 2 million.
Well,
now.
with the land, yeah. Since the land really is the valuable part.
And they built that nice pool in the backyard, which has made it appreciate a ton.
So it does seem like a big factor about public transportation, at least where we live in Utah, is also the housing situation, where it's suburbia, it is cars only. Like, we were talking on the way in, we don't even know where the nearest bus stop is from here. Like,
yeah, both you and I who grew up here.
Yeah, the nearest.
Oh, I know where it is. You guys just lost it with me. That was the most like upset,
like weird power move, man.
You guys you're just like,
now I wish we had a multi-cam setup so bad. Anyway, I was gonna say, like, the nearest public transportation that I know of is the Front Runner train station, and that's
3 miles.
Yeah, it's a bit of a walk. It would take an hour to walk from here if you're at a normal pace.
Yeah, an hour at a normal pace. You can jog it faster, but it's not comfortable, I'll tell you that.
So a big part of it is just the way people are laid out and the way cities are laid out. But also at breakfast, you were talking about the civil engineering rubric and the scorecard for Utah. You mentioned you had a little bit of involvement in that.
So specifically, it's the American Society of Civil Engineer, or ASCE, report card that they make every 4 years. And I'm currently involved with the transit section. So the idea will be that, we're just at the start of the process right now. It's 2023, but we'll be looking at the public transit infrastructure of Utah and seeing how well it meets or doesn't meet the needs.
So where do you think it's at right now, and where would you like it to be?
So it'll be kind of firing from the hip. Go
for it.
All right. And I think we would best put it in a United States cities of a similar class.
Are we doing a tier list?
You know, we might as well. But
United States tier list.
So like
tier,
cities
North Dakota.
Cities of similar size to Salt Lake City will have a different. I guess I'm saying it's not fair to compare New York to Salt Lake in terms of
different
public
needs
transit.
for different populations based upon like how the city is laid out.
And you have more people, so you have more funding, so you can do a subway system. But I would put Salt Lake as a B, just a solid B, as in like A is this is fit for the future is the scale that they use. D is this is like in major threat of not serving anyone at all and maybe being a public bad rather than a public good. I would put it as a B, where it punches above its weight, but compared to the world, I would put it in solidly in D- upper F tier.
No, I would agree. I actually think that during my time in Brazil has a more accessible and robust public transit.
So does
public
Argentina.
transit system.
Oh yeah.
than here. Like,
yeah, you could get anywhere in Sao Paulo through trains. And
yeah, you tell me a neighborhood and get me to a train station, and I could navigate about near anywhere, even still 5 years out.
And that's, I mean, it's a huge city. So
Yeah.
it has that advantage. But even in rural Argentina, the sticks, Salta, Argentina, you could get anywhere on typically more than hourly long distance buses or within the city. And it was really well connected and surprisingly walkable.
And reasonably cheap too. Like the
Very cheap, yeah.
do you remember how much it was to take the metro in Sao Paulo?
It's like 4 reais.
Yeah, it was something ridiculously
Which
cheap.
is-
That's $1.
And it's way cheaper
Yeah.
in Argentina, yeah, since it's, I mean, they haven't invested nearly as much.
And then the other places that I've taken public transit are Lisbon. I've taken public transit in, I think in Madrid and Barcelona as well. And then Switzerland, obviously. Switzerland seems to be the outlier because it's really good and it services the entire country in small communities, but it's not cheap. It
Correct,
is
yeah.
expensive.
To be
man.
fair, Switzerland is the home of the deepest tunnel in the world and the longest tunnel in the world.
Yeah.
And the coolest tunnel
And it's the
in
same
world.
tunnel.
Yeah.
So like they've got some overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Switzerland is just really cool because, like, you know, like that kind of like, I don't know if this is the average male fantasy. I like to believe that it is. But the idea of living in like a small, like rural, like farming community, like up in the mountains.
Your
and just-
suburbs are showing.
Going
Yeah.
to bed in a cap and
This,
gown,
this
you
isn't
know.
even suburbs. This is like,
Just
it's just like you've got like cows in the field, like a good forest around you.
so what I'm hearing
there's
is
a
that we three need to purchase a farm and build a little commune. on it.
Perfect.
A-
Intentional community.
No,
Yeah.
but in Switzerland, it's awesome because you can have that. But like the biggest trade off is like, oh, you live in those communities and then you're shut off from all like basic needs and like transit. In Switzerland, there will be a train station with a major train, like rail
Regular
network
service, yeah.
going through your tiny town and like not like interfering with like the isolationism or like
Yeah.
tranquility of it. Like that would be awesome because like in Utah even there are like some places like Eden and like Park City, which are like Park City a little less because it has its own community there, but like kind of areas that are a little more off the beaten path. Logan, I guess, is another
Logan's
good
got
example.
a good system, actually.
It does. Surprisingly good for its size.
But I'm just thinking of places that are nice because you could pull up like Preston, Idaho, but you know that's kind of abysmal. Scipio, Utah.
You don't need one. You can just, it's 5 miles across.
Yeah, but like being able to live in just a nice little community like that, but like also just be able to get to, you know, major establishments
Yeah.
and like, because that was the thing that really burned my wife when we were living in Logan. She hated that we weren't connected to a major freeway.
Okay.
Like you had to drive like 30 minutes just to get to I-15. And I think that concept just really messed with her.
All of this to say that when we're talking about public transit systems in the U.S., it is just, you know, the U.S. scale because
Yes.
it's comparatively.
Unfortunately, all public transit infrastructure in the U.S. on average is F tier
Comparatively to other nations.
compared to other nations.
It's just interesting because
There's shades of F tier though.
yeah, it's just interesting because like the United States is like one of the only countries that has these just, you know, 1,000-mile freeways that just you can get on I-15 and you can drive over
Yeah, I was about to
24
say.
hours and not I don't really think there's any other country out there that really has a road like that. First of all,
It's uncommon, that's for sure.
I don't think most countries are even big enough to support a road like that.
A
Like
network, you mean? Of freeways, interstate
a
system?
network too, but even just I-15, the main, for those of you who don't know, the main freeway in Utah that goes all the way down into
Yeah.
Nevada.
From Glacier National Park into San Diego, California.
Yeah. That road alone, pick that road up and place it pretty much anywhere in the world. There are not a lot of borders that can fit it.
Well, yeah.
Like-
In length, but especially in width.
Yeah. Like, I mean, Russia could take it. Brazil could probably have it. But those countries just don't have this. So it's like, it's interesting because when you think of like infrastructure setup, it's like, it is really cool of the idea that you can get on a road like that and you can just drive and you can go, high speeds, but also, it'd be a lot more effective and a lot cheaper if you could get on a train
And less dangerous.
and much less dangerous.
Yes.
Tell us about fatalities on
Okay.
trains.
Yeah.
We keep cutting you off, by the way. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
I gave you the floor to talk about the
It's just
ASCE
fine.
thing.
If you gave me the floor the entire time, I wouldn't stop talking until the time limit was up. So I'm going to discuss sort of the starting points for all these, and I'll make sure to give you a list of videos that have really been formative for me, helpful for me, that you can put in the description. But man, where were we going with that?
Train fatalities.
Fatalities. So the third leading cause of death in Utah, after heart disease and cancer, is that you die in some kind of accident with a car. Whether that be that you were walking, you were biking, you were in another car is the most common because everyone's in another car all the time. But as you try to use this car-based infrastructure and keep upping the speed limits so that you can stay within a reasonable time of being anywhere, you will continue to risk more and more lives. On top of that, there is no infrastructure that degrades worse than roads. The damage that semi-trucks put on roads is so much worse than if you had run the same cargo over rail. That's why we run so much heavy-duty cargo over rail. So not only is it less bang for your buck, it's also risking your life more. And there's really no way, there's a hard cap for how big you can make your suburbs before you're just an unreasonable distance from the city, or you are sacrificing people to the road gods.
Yeah. I just think it's so hard because, like, truck delivery driving, I think, is the number one highest job for high school educated adults in America.
It makes sense. It pays well.
And I think it is one of the biggest sources of employment. And so it's like, it is one of those hard things where if you did replace it with trains and rails, that is a huge chunk of the economy you're taking out in the form of jobs and employment, because what you could do with, 100 trucks and 100 drivers, you could do with one train and one conductor. And if you're driving a train and you want to reach back to grab a bag of chips, you can do that. You seen the video of the guy in the truck that reaches back to grab a bag of chips and just flips the semi?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
It's really kind of a Rust Belt mentality as well, where there was this huge section of the U.S. in the Midwest that was so productive as far as steel and coal and automobiles. And once they were able to ship those jobs overseas, it all turned into the Rust Belt, as you're familiar with. But it's really a Rust Belt mentality to think that like it would be okay to just replace all of these trucker jobs. And to clarify, there would always be a role for truckers. There are truckers in Europe.
Yeah.
Like, truck infrastructure has to happen. It's just often much smaller scale. It's delivery trucks rather than semi-trucks. Mm-hmm. And it would not make sense to replace a whole bunch of jobs and then not help those people get job training in different jobs, Yeah. Like, assuming that they couldn't all get jobs as delivery truck drivers rather than semi-truck drivers, like, you would need some sort of program so that you weren't unnecessarily punishing this group that was already unnecessarily put at risk.
See, but that's just the hard gambit you have to take, is assuming that, the government is going to actually support and care about, like if there was to be this big switch.
I don't think
'cause-
we're having to talk about what's realistic currently.
Yeah.
We're having to talk about what's idealistic.
Yeah.
And this would be the jumping off point where you would talk about specifically what it would look like in each state and nationally.
Okay. Well, I was going to bring up that I worry that there are too many special interest groups against the expansion of public transit. But if we're just talking about the ideal, I'm fine talking about the
Because
ideal.
I agree that there are all sorts of obstacles. We are in the midst of the biggest revival in just kind of pro-collective sentiment, it feels like, since the end of the Gilded Age, where there's greater union sentiment, there's greater public transit sentiment, there's greater public funding sentiment.
Man,
in
it's
general.
almost like we have unregulated monopolies again.
It's almost like there's a parallel here.
Maybe. Wait, 1920, 2020, unregulated monopolies, pandemics. Oh my gosh, history is a flat circle.
It really does feel like this period we're in right now is like the historical period. It's like, because there's events that I feel like will be remembered, but I think this is like the period, because people talk about like the Roaring 20s, like, and it's the Roaring 20s again, and it's like I feel like 50 years from now people will be like, oh, you remember all those big like social movements and like all that like mentality shift that happened in like the 2020s. Like it really does feel like we're in a major, like you said, like I ideal shift, and it is going to be interesting to see what the result of that is. Like,
Hopefully not another Great Depression. But I really, sorry, I'm just following the historical line to the finish here. I don't think it's perfectly replicated, and I think
Thankfully.
hopefully we've learned from some of our lessons.
Hopefully.
I don't personally
it does
predict that.
seem like, and you know, it's hard to know what's going on behind closed doors, but like it feels like we keep seeing like tremors coming from these big monopolies though. Like you see companies like Disney that own everything, and then you'll hear reports like Disney is worried, or like Disney's considering selling off this, like Disney's panicking, and it's like, how? It's like, what's going on? So it's like, if a company like that could collapse, like I feel like that would start a huge chain reaction of events.
It really was a pretty complex set of causes that set off the stock market. So it might be beyond the scope, but
Yeah.
I guess the last thing to add to the whole monopoly situation, time being a flat circle, is I think the difference this time is the Europeans. We're gonna be taking it off of an America-centric view for a second. We're not attacking monopolies as aggressively here, but over there they're going hard, and they are mostly going for like consumer protection. Like look at the iPhone, for example. The iPhone likes to keep people in their ecosystem with features that are exclusive from iPhone to iPhone, and then their own cable, right? Yeah. The Europeans are like, no, you have to use USB-C, and so USB-C.
iPhone just switched to USB-C.
Exactly. That's because the Europeans said you
I've
have to
seen
do
it.
this.
I've seen one in person.
Anyway.
It's a glorious thing to behold.
Katie has one.
She's got a
Beautiful.
15. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the story.
So yeah, that's a great point.
So hopefully that's some optimism that with global companies, there is also theoretically global regulation. So
I feel like it's a time of some serious optimism. If I had been in the same stage of life that I am today, 20 years ago, I would feel like no one cared at all about public transit, and there was absolutely nothing, and there was no pro-union sentiment. But like where we're at right now, it feels much better. It feels like we've made progress, and that's exciting to get in
It does feel like the average American citizen is gaining a lot more power and ability in what they can say and what they can achieve, which is interesting because, you know, even though United States has been set up as a democracy where it's, you know, the people vote, people decide.
yeah, Republic and all that.
it has felt for a very long time like, you know, that's only like surface level, but you know, they can't really do anything. But like, there's been so many examples recently, and like, you know, not exactly the same thing, but just as an example, like the whole actors writers strike was a great example of like, you know, people showing other people like, hey, actually, you deserve more, and you can ask for more, and you can want things to be optimized to be friendly for people, consumer, employee. And I think that, you know, besides just those industries getting better accommodations for their careers, I think it's a great way of showing just the general population like, hey, like we do live in a country where you have the power to fight for these things. And I think that it's been a really long time where a lot of people have forgotten that. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, like we don't have to just let ourselves be treated like dirt. Like,
I think that's a great point. Even to end on is that it feels like even though we're at such a rough spot as far as public transit in the US, there are occasional diamonds in the rough. You can choose where you're going to live to some degree, and try to skew towards areas that will allow you to use public transit more. You can show up in those spaces, and hopefully things are on the mend right now. That's how it feels to me, at least. I feel optimistic.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good place to end. Any other final thoughts?
so
Unions
think
are
about
more
communism.
unions are a more complex topic than we've given them time for here. There are situations where I'm not completely in favor of the actions the unions have taken, but I think the existence of unions and having some form of say is what I support. So just to clarify.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of encapsulating what I was trying to say with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Media Pending Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard or disagree with us even, feel free to like and subscribe and let us know in the comments down below. And I will open this up to a poll on Spotify as well. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
The poll is planes, trains, or automobiles.
All right. Bye.